Everybody, Joe here. Thanks for tuning in to Psychedelics today. Today on the show we have Shane LeMaster. I got the opportunity to meet Shane out in Oakland at the Psychedelic Science 2017 conference, and that was awesome. Shane was talking to Daniel McQueen, who is a past guest in the show, responsible for medicinal mindfulness. Some really interesting stuff there, and actually there's going to be some really cool stuff coming out from Daniel McQueen pretty soon related to DMT. We'll have some announcements on that in the near future. I'm about to talk to him in a few minutes, actually. So Shane is a licensed therapist working in Colorado, does some really interesting addiction work, also does some retreats with a nonprofit helping veterans. He's also got some interests in microdosing for athletic performance, specifically martial arts like JuJitsu. He also has a lot of experience and interest in traditional ayahuasca and peyote use, and we get into some of that as well. So I think this is a unique episode for us because we do start to talk about flow states, which is something we haven't really discussed on the show at all before. And I think it's something that's hugely important for us to be talking about because something so near and dear to my heart, being a avid skier, snowboarder, mountain biker, all that kind of stuff. So it's something I almost feel negligent for not talking about it. So we get into that. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. I think we're going to have Shane on next week as well because we didn't really get into microdosing as much as we should have. So we're going to dig into that as well. So enjoy the show. A couple announcements. Kyle and I have relaunched a class calling it Navigating Psychedelics, lessons on integration and self-care. We're expanding the initial class a whole bunch by adding 10 interviews, exclusive interviews with experts in the field and getting their perspective on self-care and or integration, depending on their specialty. So information you probably won't hear anywhere else for a while. And really excited about that. You can learn more on our site, psychedelicstoday.com, and sign up there or reach out if you're interested. Psychedelics Today, email at gmail.com. Yeah, feel free to reach out whenever. Also, I have a breathwork event here in Breckenridge, Colorado, July 8th. Plenty of room left if anybody's interested in coming, and we'd love to have you. I think that's really it for announcements. I'm sure there's going to be more workshops on the agenda in the near future. Also, we're looking at being out there for the Horizons NYC conference in, I think, early October. So if you're going to be there, hit us up. Love to meet up and say hi. And I think that's it for now. Enjoy the episode and take care. Bye-bye. The near future is here sooner than we thought. I just had a conversation with Daniel McQueen and wanted to give you guys an update. So we're co-sponsoring an event in Boulder, Colorado on July 23, and it's all about extended state DMT, or as Daniel calls it, cyber DMT. There's a researcher coming from Japan, Andrew, what's his name here? Dr. Andrew Gallimore, computational neurobiologist, pharmacologist, chemist. He's with the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. So there's going to be a talk there. Daniel's going to give a talk about cyber DMT or extended state DMT as well afterwards. And there's going to be a panel discussion and also going to be some breath work, Daniel's community breath work through medicinal mindfulness afterwards. So that's going to be a really cool event. Wanted to throw that out because I had the opportunity to stitch this in real quick. So more information at medicinalmindfulness.com or on our events page, psychedelicstoday.com. Click events in the top bar, and you can find it there. Also in our Facebook feed. So reach out if you have any questions. Looking forward. Take care. Bye.
Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Your hosts, Kyle and Joe. We're here with Shane LeMaster. He's interested in psychedelics, martial arts. He's a drug and alcohol counselor. Welcome to the show, Shane. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's always good to speak to fellow psychonauts.
Yeah, yeah,
Ditto.
definitely. So I think Joe and you met out at Psychedelic Science, correct? Daniel introduced you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Daniel
that's
McQueen.
Yep.
Yeah, it was like a chance meeting in the hallway. Shane mentioned he was from Colorado, and I got really psyched. It's like, oh, perfect, more. It's what is that? I want to have a name for that. It's like the McKenna imperative: find the others. And it was just kind of one of those things. I said, okay, this is probably a good chance meeting. So let's dig in. And Shane, you have a really interesting background. You do a lot of stuff, including addiction counseling or work as a therapist in a kind of normal setting. You work with veterans doing some kind of, I don't really know how to put that, retreats maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just have a whole fully featured life, it seems, and also are interested in martial arts and how psychedelics might tie in nicely with martial arts and how there could even be a tradition of that in the past, or probably most likely is. So let's dig in. How did you first kind of get exposed to the psychedelic material, and what kind of sent it home that you needed to be involved in some way?
Well, actually, my first exposure to any mind-altering substance was psychedelic. When I was 16, the first substance I ever took was LSD, and it was while on a field trip at military school. We were at an amusement park, so you can only imagine the fun that we had that day, playing laser tag and riding roller coasters. But I knew from that day forward that I finally had some proof that there was something else out there besides what I could just see beyond my own hand, beyond my own face. And so I experimented recreationally with most hallucinogens as a teenager into my young 20s. But this was a time where I really had no spiritual backing, no foundation in anything. And I found Buddhism in my undergrad years at CU Boulder, and had always done martial arts throughout my whole life. But it wasn't until I found Buddhism that I started to understand that these altered states of consciousness had some greater significance than just the novelty and the excitement and the enhancement of dance experiences and stuff. I started to realize that there's a much deeper connection to not only our ancestors but to the spiritual realms and the spiritual domains, and that bled into my Buddhism, bled into my martial arts. My psychedelic use has blended in with my martial arts as well, and my passion has always been studying and understanding the human mind, and that's why I got into psychology. That's why I became a certified sport and performance psychology consultant. That's why I went through my own addiction phases and recovered from those, and now I help other people as a licensed addiction counselor and integration therapist here in Colorado. So really, psychedelics started out as an experiment, and has since woven its way into every aspect of my life, and I would not have it any other way. I'm so grateful for how much psychedelics have enriched my life and enriched my work, and enriched my passions.
When you were doing it recreationally, and you said that you saw your first experience and you saw something beyond this life, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so growing up, I had always been more of like an atheist or agnostic, based my understanding of our reality in science, what I could see, what I could measure, this 3D realm that we live in, and really had I was very ignorant to the idea that there could be anything beyond that. But through the psychedelic experience, it opened my eyes, it opened my heart and my spirit to seeing that, there is far more that we don't understand, in comparison to what we really do understand. We think we know a lot, but once you take psychedelic, you understand very quickly that you know next to nothing of what's going on in this universe, and that just fascinated me. It seemed like the final frontier, but it also seemed very familiar. It was somewhere that I had been before many times, and it just instilled this desire to go back there and explore that and figure out what that was.
Beautiful. And what made you get into counseling in that realm?
Well, living in the Western world, we have less opportunity for things like shaman schools and things like that. So I kind of had to take the Western-based approach, which is, mental health in the counseling field. So, I made my way through Western education, got my bachelor's and my master's degree in psychology, like I was told I was supposed to. Got my experience playing by all the rules. But I always had an undertone in all my work that, I wanted to go beyond the Western model. I was more akin to Eastern traditional medicines, getting away from medications and really helping people tap into their own innate abilities within their mind to not only manifest physical health, but also manifest mental health. And my particular interest is enhancing human performance, both mentally and physically. So going beyond just maintaining health and now pushing the envelope and seeing like what are we really made of as humans? What can we achieve if we tap into these deep mental states?
Do you have a background as an athlete growing up?
Yeah, so I've been a martial artist my whole life, almost 30 years now. So always had martial arts in my life, whether it be, Taekwondo or Aikido when I was young, wrestling during middle school and high school, Krav Maga, Sambo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing. These are all things that I've been involved in my whole life. I was also an athlete in a variety of other varsity sports growing up, but I was never really the most athletic on any team. I was never, I could hold my own, but I was never, NFL quality or anything like that. So I think my interest began by exploring, like, how can I reach these potentials that other people are reaching if it's possible for all of us? And that's kind of where my athletics and psychedelics started to blend.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm interested in somatic psychology, so kind of embodying, being in the body, and I think that's really important for a lot of folks. And I've been really interested in trying to get myself into some sort of martial arts. I did do Aikido for a little bit, and I find that practice to be really great because it's like nonviolent and maybe you're just tossing people around. But yeah, there does seem like there's a bridge between like these flow states that you might get into martial arts and the psychedelic world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also I'm a big meditator, so I meditate almost daily, and I find that meditation or the states of consciousness we reach during meditation and flow states, the states we reach when we're totally in the moment in sports, and then the flow states that we reach under psychedelics, where it just seems like our mind and our body are fully in tune, fully in balance, fully in harmony. All three of these states, in my experience, have very close similarities, and it should be an area of study, which I hope to someday, find a research team that would be willing to take me on so that I can pursue this line of research.
Yeah. Could you break down that flow state a little bit? Like, what is it? How do you access it for people that are interested?
Sure. So the leading expert on flow states is a guy, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, but I'm going to do my best. It's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I believe he is based out of Canada, but he's an old school sports psychology guru, I would say, and he's probably considered as much in those circles that I run in. But he's really dedicated his life's work to examining these flow states in human beings, not only during fight or flight responses, but also how to better elicit flow states when you want them. But the science and the evidence to back up a lot of the, I guess, the discussion on eliciting flow states is still, it hasn't been solidified yet. So we don't quite know yet how the flow states happen or how we can elicit them on command. It's another area of study I'd like to study, but we do know, some of the characteristic traits that people experience in flow states that they report. And we also know that performance, physical performance and mental performance goes through the roof when you're in a flow state. It's kind of like you getting out of your own way. So we're always in our way. And I can use athletics that as an example just because that's my experience. But in athletics, particularly, martial arts, if you're thinking about your movements as you're moving, you're already a step behind. So really, you need to get out of your own way, get out of your mind, stop thinking, and get into this place where you can trust and accept that the training was effective, that your muscle memory and your muscle movements are going to be there, that your reflexes and your balance is going to be there, and you need to have this trust. When you reach that state, time seems to slow down. Just like in psychedelic experiences, you can see things more clearly, you can see things happen before they happen, and you can react to your environment in much more effective ways, both, like I said, physically and mentally. So people can get in flow states while doing academic work or while writing a book or while doing surgery. Surgeons can get in flow states while they're doing that. So really any domain where performance is a variable, flow states can be studied and examined in these states.
I feel a little negligent, Kyle, in not discussing flow states before, because I live in a ski town, and that's what I do is like a total addict for flow states, and that's what I'm doing. And
well, you almost started a podcast called Flow State too, right?
It actually was called Flow States Radio, and it is almost offline. But yeah, it's this concept of flow is huge, and we need to understand it because it's one of the top ways we could make ourselves happier and have more fulfilling lives. It's one of many ways, but it's a key one, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I really hope you can get a research team around that. I think even some college teams would be interested in that kind of research. Like, what does microdosing look like? Maybe they go on professional vacations to Amsterdam for a couple weeks every off season to get microdose training or something. And it would be really cool to see how that develops. So you also do some really interesting work with veterans. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah. So I was just brought in to a nonprofit based here in Colorado. They're a nationwide nonprofit organization, and their primary aim when they first started was to help not only veterans but help the families reintegrate back to normal civilian life after their service. They have since expanded and formed a sub-program, which is what I just became clinical director of. And our primary focus in that venue is to help train veterans who have already gone through the initial training, the initial integration training, help train them not to become counselors, but to become peer mentors, and to reach out to other vets who are struggling with their transitions, who are suicidal. And our primary mission is to reduce the suicide rate among veterans. I mean, there's over 20 veterans that commit suicide in our country every single day. And that's just way too high. So our primary goal is to, give struggling veterans a peer support network that's nationwide or even worldwide, that they can reach out at any time and get the support they need. And so the work that I do, as a clinical director is more, writing the curriculum, how are we going to train these vets to be peer supports? What do they need to be paying attention to as far as self-care, and putting on retreats, 2-3 times a year where these vets can come up and get hands-on, one-on-one role-play training with me and some other vets who are, reached higher levels as coaches. And yeah, our goal is really to prevent suicide as much as possible.
That's wonderful. I'm curious, the peer model, it seems like it's starting to gain some traction. What would you say the benefit of having like a peer model versus like a bunch of clinicians just hanging out with these vets? I mean, obviously the peers can relate a little bit better, but it seems like this peer movement's kind of gaining traction. So that's really cool that you're doing this type of work.
Yeah, so from my experience in working with vets, not only in my private practice, but also with this nonprofit, is that after receiving the care that they receive at the VA, most veterans are against receiving any sort of professional help, any sort of government-funded help. They just constantly report to me that the care they get at the VA is substandard. And it almost turns them away, to a point where they don't want to seek help anymore. So this peer model is much more beneficial, like you said, because they don't feel like the person on the other end of the phone or the person they're talking to has any financial vested interest in them getting better. That the person is really there to talk and cares about them and cares about their well-being and isn't there to collect a paycheck and isn't talking off of some script written by the government. A lot of these veterans, their eyes were opened after going to war, and they realized firsthand the corruption and that comes from the government, and they don't trust it. I experienced a little bit of kickback at first when they brought me into the group, which I was expecting. I'm not a vet myself, and the vets saw this, young clinician coming in who had, less combat experience than they did, and what is he going to tell us? But I think it's because of my upbringing. I grew up around a lot of military people. I serve a lot of military vets in my practice. I even train military personnel in some of their hand-to-hand stuff. So I know the lingo. I know what goes on. I was invested myself in the culture. So very quickly, those boundaries broke, and they let me in within the first day. And but they told me, this is uncommon. That they usually, just like civilians hold stigmas against vets, vets hold stigmas against civilians too. And
right.
We need to realize that we're all on the same team. The civilians are out to help you, and we want to give back because you gave to us so freely.
I've wanted to do some work. Kyle and I both do breathwork workshops, and I've wanted to bring that to some veteran groups. I'm close with some people that run some veteran support organizations, like I don't know if you've heard of it, Project Healing Waters, where they take people fly fishing, vets and their families fly fishing up in the mountains of Colorado, outfit them, and stuff that's not necessarily what we picture as people with psychedelic interest as being super healing, but just nature exposure and being in some sort of flow state. I think those two things are huge. But how do I bring something like this psychedelic conversation or holotropic breathwork stuff to these veteran groups as a non-veteran? It's very tricky. Like you say, you have to walk the walk and look more similar to them than sometimes they might look to each other. As somebody that's active in JuJitsu and martial arts, you do look like you could be a vet. So it's not, that probably helps a lot. Like, do you have any tips for how non-veterans could interact more helpfully with the veteran communities?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. My particular look that I have, I definitely use it to my benefit.
Right.
When with vets. So, all my tattoos and, my samurai style haircut and my big beard and, my stature because of the jiu-jitsu, it definitely makes me look like a vet, and a lot of vets think I'm a vet right off the bat. But for clinicians who may not look like me, the best advice I could give for breaking down those barriers is just let them know that, you really do care, that you're not going to give them the same treatment that they got from the VA, that you understand what it's like to not get care that you were promised in the first place. There's a sense of betrayal, betrayal by the people who you were protecting. So making sure that if you want to work with vets, go out and talk to vets off the clock. Talk with as many vets as possible. Hear their stories. Read autobiographies from vets who have written about their experiences in wartime. Watch documentaries. Just immerse yourself as deep as you can and really try and understand the plight of the veteran. Because it really is just like anybody else's experience. It's unique. Just like anything in mental health, we cannot approach any of this stuff from a standardized, book of tools. Those are merely guides to give us ideas to pursue it on a more individual or unique basis, and to see them as individuals.
Right.
You can't lump all vets together.
Right. Absolutely.
Just like they try and lump all civilians together. It's part of us to do that.
Yeah.
We really have to evolve past that. We have to grow beyond our clinical training and become more human.
Oh yeah, great advice. Thanks for that. I definitely was, I don't know, probably when I was younger, really against like a lot of that war stuff. But as I've been becoming more interested in psychedelics and especially the MDMA for PTSD trials, I've been starting to try and, view that totally different with the veterans, and just having a lot more empathy and being like, wow, like you guys served our country at being 18, just after high school. Like, I don't know what the hell that is like. And then seeing so much traumatic stuff and coming back here and not knowing how to integrate that experience and maybe not having the support. I mean, yeah, it's pretty wild. So yeah, over the years, I've definitely been a little bit more compassionate towards that, which is, I think, good.
Yeah. And I know you guys brought up, trying to get vets interested in maybe not psychedelic experiences right off the bat, but at least into breath work. Do you guys have any experience with, getting any positive results from vets doing breath work?
I don't know of any individual studies, but I would love to have some sort of pilot study with one or two measures being done.
Sure.
I think that would be really, really cool. Kyle, do you know of any specific veteran studies with breathwork?
I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. We'd probably have to look that up. But, just from personal experience, there have been some older vets that have been coming to some of the workshops, and, they have pretty positive results. But I don't think like some of the older ones are probably experiencing a lot of that PTSD. As the newer ones are experiencing at a higher rate. But one person who's a psychiatrist comes to our workshops a lot, and they are a psychiatrist at the VA, and it's been really interesting. I've definitely talked to her about how breathwork has changed her clinical practice and showing up to work, and that's been really interesting. I mean, it's totally changed her way she approaches the work. But yeah, I've always thought about that. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how effective breath work is for helping PTSD and trying to get back in the body. Because I think a lot of that is the trauma is being so detached from the body and being afraid to interact with it, and to do the breath work and get back in the body and feel that. I don't know. I think it could be somewhat beneficial. And, even with flow states or doing martial arts, like getting back in the body, I think is really important for people that have had experience of trauma. I know it's just been really significant for me having like a near-death experience and being really detached from my body. Getting back in has been like a really big task.
Yeah. And, I think upon initial consideration, I think, through my experience with breathwork anyway, it could be re-traumatizing to some extent,
that too, yeah.
Ventilation, increased heart rate, increased respiration, that can bring about a re-experiencing of the trauma. But if that person could finish the full cycle of feeling and dealing with the trauma, it could be very beneficial. Yeah, I mean, like you said, with martial arts, with jujitsu, I mean, we run a very small veterans only jujitsu class at my gym every weekend, and what we're doing is we're helping to treat the PTSD through some exposure. So, like you said, they need to reconnect with their bodies, and a lot of this trauma, I believe, is stored not only in the psychology of the veteran, but also in the body. Whereas someone may come up and touch them in a certain way that will re-trigger their PTSD. And so what with our veterans MMA and jiu-jitsu class is we'll come in, me as a clinician with experience doing the PTSD therapy, and also coupling that with physical touch. So jiu-jitsu is a very physical sport, and you are in close proximity, dealing with arms around your neck and your limbs being bent nearly backwards, and people smothering you and sitting on top of you, and you reach these panic states very, very readily in that sport. So by coupling the PTSD psychotherapy that I do with this form of exposure therapy through jiu-jitsu, we're starting to see, some of these vets are coming around. They're becoming more social in their daily lives. They're understanding that, hey, when I feel this panic coming on, when I feel like there's no escape, I know that there's an escape because I escaped from it in jiu-jitsu class, and I got to a better place. This will end, they learn that just because their heart rate goes through the roof and they think they're going to die, they have the ability to calm themselves down, to slow their mind down, and to think their way out of that feeling and to get to a more advantageous position. And it translates into their daily life.
I think that's huge.
Wow.
Yeah. Martial arts as a somatic therapy technique.
That's really cool. You can't bill insurance for that, though, can you?
No.
No insurance. Maybe one day.
Fascinating. Well, theoretically, it could fit into the health insurance aspect of like I know some insurances get discounts for fitness class, like getting a gym membership if you like keep a log or something. So partial coverage maybe, but we'd have to get some research done on that kind of thing. I think we're getting there. Martial arts, I feel like, is having this whole resurgence right now, like globally, with MMA and people like Joe Rogan, and UFC probably almost has its own TV station at this point. So it's like something's there, and jiu-jitsu is hugely at the root of a lot of this stuff. So I think people would go there first, hopefully, before they go to some MMA gym and start getting into hardcore training like that. But you never know. Are you seeing anybody do research on martial arts as a therapy for PTSD or anything like that?
I haven't really looked into it much. So no, I couldn't tell you if anybody's using that. I think it's very difficult to run actual research that's standardized and that you're accounting for all the variables with such a dynamic expression as jiu-jitsu. Every jiu-jitsu player has a different style, and everybody you wrestle with has a different experience, and you learn something new from every single person. So unless that's something I'm exploring myself, is how do you turn that into a study where you can control for those kind of variables. But not to my knowledge, nobody's doing those yet.
Right. It'd be really tough to put them into like interesting to explore for sure. So, can we talk a little bit about like peyote and ayahuasca and how you feel like those might relate to, I guess, self-development and therapeutic aspects and just general expansion? Like that's a very general statement. So wherever you want to go with that.
Sure. So use of peyote ceremony and ayahuasca ceremony for personal development. We could take this discussion in many different ways. I think, the more traditional peyote and ayahuasca ceremonies are the type that I've been in. They have been profound in my own personal development, mostly during the integration phase, but also during the experience itself. As far as peyote shamanism and ayahuasca shamanism, becoming more of a popularized thing in the United States, and people going on week-long retreats, things like that. I'm not sure how. I guess I'm not sure of the people who participate in those, their motivation, or if it's if they're using it in the right way. Who's to say what the right way is or not? But the way I've experienced peyote and ayahuasca have been in traditional ceremony, with a very healthy container around it, healthy people coming into it, who have the right intention. They're screened properly, and the integration phase afterwards is more comprehensive. It's not just you come here, you take this medicine, and then you leave, and good luck. There's follow-up weeks, sometimes months afterwards, to further help with the integration process. And I've found anyway that the traditional ceremonies have been probably more beneficial to me for personal growth than have my own like high-dose LSD experiences or high-dose psilocybin experiences where I'd just go up into nature. I mean, those are very, very enlightening type experiences in themselves, but the ceremony and being with a group and feeling that group energy really adds something to that personal growth aspect.
We find a breathwork group is huge. Super huge for the breathwork workshops we do is this group process, and having like a dynamic group energy, totally huge. But go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, what do you think the difference is between the ceremony versus going out in nature? Maybe is it because of the preparation, the group setting, the integration of the ceremony, where maybe you don't get that by yourself in nature?
There's a lot more that goes into the traditional ceremonies. So in the ceremonies I've taken part in, there's usually, a diet regimen that is suggested that you follow for 2 weeks before. There's intention setting that starts a month or more before, where you're meditating on it every day before these ceremonies. The actual ceremony itself, and being in the presence of a shaman and understanding the history behind the ceremonies and how ancient they are, really makes you feel connected to your ancestral lineage. It helps provide an added level of respect for the medicine and for yourself. And then the structure with the integration, using the group, again, this peer model, bouncing ideas back and forth from each other, having open access to some of the shamans to, bring up dreams or bring up visions that you've had afterwards. Those are all things that I think are additional with the traditional ceremony. But with any psychedelic use that I do these days, it's done out of respect for the medicine. Even if I go up into nature, there's still preparation that goes into it. Maybe not quite as extensive. I might not start a diet or anything, but I will have meditated on some intention. I will have, made sure that I have a safety net in place with people on speed dial if I go into crisis. It's preparation there, but it seems like the container is a lot more solid when it's conducted in a ceremony.
What do you think about some of the clinical stuff that's going on? How do you view that?
I love the work that's going on at Johns Hopkins. I got to meet a number of those researchers out at the Psychedelic Science Conference. I absolutely love what's going on in the clinics in Switzerland, as well as at UCLA, things like that. From my own experience, I'm a little concerned with how, I guess, static and sterile the clinical environments are that these people are going for their experience. But it seems like the protocols that these researchers are using are fantastic. Most of the researchers that I talk to have lots of experience themselves with psychedelics, which I think is, a crucial component for any clinician who wants to work in any way with psychedelics, whether through integration or through doing psychedelic psychotherapy. You need to have experienced these things. You will not, what these people are talking about, you'll think that they're
yeah.
So that's really important. And most of these research teams have those people on staff, I feel like, the government, DEA, the ATF, they're all still getting in the way quite a bit of expanding a lot of these research projects. But with MAPS getting bigger and bigger, with the MDMA studies going to phase 3, there's some phase 3 studies on medicinal marijuana going on in other countries. With some of the regulations starting to release their hold a little bit, I feel like there's tons of room for this field to grow. Psychedelics, psychotherapy, and that's what I'm hoping to spend the rest of my life doing if it ever manifests.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about how, MAPS, psychedelic studies, how MDMA isn't necessarily like a straight up psychedelic? Like at higher doses for many people, it can have those effects, right? But it's an amphetamine that's doing some really funny things. And, obviously is super therapeutic. So like, I feel like in some ways it's almost confusing the issue. Like we're talking about psychedelics, but we're talking about MDMA, which is a great drug. Don't get me wrong. But, what's up? Like, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we take the term psychedelic in its, or in the most literal sense that I've heard it defined, mind manifesting.
Yeah.
Right. So with MDMA, you may not get the visual hallucinations and things, but your mind is still manifesting new connections. When you're under the influence of it, you're understanding your connection to yourself and your connection to other people in such greater detail. Your relational mind is manifest during these experiences, and with the peyote ceremonies, that's a very somatic psychedelic. So I actually see very few visuals when I go to these ceremonies. It's all energy work. It's all body work that I'm feeling. And so, in that sense, it's body manifesting and mind manifesting through my subconscious. The Aya ceremonies for me have definitely been more cerebral, so those are easily classified as mind manifesting for me. But as far as your question goes with MDMA, as long as I think it could be qualified as a psychedelic experience for sure, because your mind is making new connections. It is changing, and if guided properly, changing for the better. I mean, even a meditation can be a psychedelic experience.
Absolutely.
A flow state can be a psychedelic experience if you are experiencing your highest potential.
Yeah, it can be very transcendent, non-drug things for sure. So we haven't talked too much on the show about peyote at all, really, which is interesting. I'm just noticing that now. Can you... I'm afraid to ask, but I'll ask anyway. Is there any kind of part of any of your experiences that you could share to characterize maybe what it's like for people, for listeners? Because I think there's huge value in peyote work, but without understanding it myself, having not participated, I can't really talk to people about it.
Sure. I would say out of all the psychedelics that I have experienced, peyote is the toughest. It is not an easy journey to embark on for an evening in a teepee. not only is the medicine bitter to the taste and makes you want to purge after you eat it, but the feelings you feel in your body with the traumas and the energy blockages being broken apart, and expelling those through purging, those can be very difficult and challenging experiences. Having the mindfulness to still sit through that and still sit in the teepee all night, extremely difficult. And you're met with other extraneous challenging things in your environment. Like at the last peyote ceremony, the first 2 hours of the ceremony, the teepee was just full of smoke from the fire in the middle. So all of our eyes were burning. None of us could open our eyes. We're all inhaling smoke because it's closed in. It's very challenging in that regard too. And the heat from the fire gets extremely hot. And sitting in a cross-legged position for 10, 12 hours straight is very difficult, very challenging. Sometimes these peyote ceremonies are coupled with a 2.5 hour sweat lodge afterwards, and that's sensory deprivation, so that can be even more challenging than the ceremony itself, where you're sitting in the earth in pitch black in 120, 140 degree sauna temperatures with super loud drumming and singing going on. It's definitely the most challenging journey work that I've done.
Wow. So let me get this straight. You're in a teepee with a group and you're just sitting cross-legged for a few hours, and there's a shaman there that's usually guiding you through it with the fire?
Yeah, so we're sitting in a teepee in a circle around the outer edge. There's a shaman, and he's called the roadman. Then there's a few other officer positions in the teepee going on. So the participants sit around the outside and just partake in the medicine work. And your main goal as a participant is just to sit there, eat the medicine when it comes around, focus on your intention, and stare at the fire to receive your messages. But there's the roadman, who's the shaman. There's the drummer, who goes around and does all the drumming on the traditional water drum all night. There's the doorman, who is responsible for keeping track of you when you leave the teepee to go to the bathroom or whatever. They're the ones who come back and get you if you get lost. They're also responsible for blessing and cleaning up your purged vomit. Once you do expel that, they clean it up and bless the spot that it happened, and then go outside and bury it in a very ceremonial way. And there's also the fire tender, and their job is to maintain the fire all night long. On the altar in the middle of the teepee, the fire tender makes certain shapes with the ashes throughout the night, and it's a 4-stage ceremony. So the first stage is a half moon shape. Second stage is a water bird that they create out of the ashes. Third state is a firebird, and the last state is a heart. And so, the ceremony starts around 9 or 10 at night and gets out the next morning around 8 a.m. When the sun has been up for a little while. So it's an all-night ceremony, and it can be extremely challenging. But it feels like you're in a spaceship when you're in that. It feels like you're in a spaceship with a bunch of other fellow travelers. And you get to commune with the spirits. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. You are having conversations, or at least receiving messages back, typically. Yeah, is there a certain characteristic to them? Like ayahuasca would be something like a grandmother. Ibogaine would be kind of like a tough grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the peyote is referred to as a grandfather peyote. And there's in my very first peyote ceremony, there was a shaman in there who spoke of a prophecy where the grandmother ayahuasca and the grandfather peyote would be brought together in ceremony, and that this would be how the world would be changed. And so that was kind of interesting that peyote and ayahuasca were both introduced at the same time during that ceremony.
Interesting. And also the spirit of peyote, is it the deer? Am I correct? Maybe it's different for different people, but deer.
Yep, that's one of the major spirits, is the deer.
Cool. Our breathwork teacher has this really awesome Huichol it's a yarn painting in beeswax, and he sometimes he'll show it at workshops. But yeah, it shows the roadman and whatnot shooting the peyote caps and the deer spirit in the back. It's really interesting.
Yeah. You guys should try it if you guys get a chance.
Would love to.
It sounds scary, but it sounds like something I should do.
Yeah.
Is there in your
and it's totally illegal, by the way. You guys didn't know that. Yeah, technically federally legal through the Native American Church. So your listeners can look up the Native American Church online and find local groups that may be holding ceremonies around them.
Yeah, that's huge. People do legal things. We don't want you to break the law. So is there any conversations in the Colorado peyote world or this Western peyote world about conservation of peyote? I remember there being a couple tracks in Oakland about that being a kind of a major issue, like greenhouses not being the way to go or whatever.
Yeah, they do talk about it in the circles. They talk about how Western industrialization is infringing on their sacred grounds where they grow the peyote, and just going through there with tractors and tilling up everything. And these buttons, these peyote cacti, a cacti may be the size of the palm of your hand, and that would be a really large one. That one may take like 80 years to grow.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, these things don't just replenish every year. You have to, you really have to take care to grow them in cycles and conserve as much as you can. Yeah, I think the same thing is going on also with the Colorado river toad, and people trying to, swipe those up for the 5-MeO off of those toads, and they're nearing that extinction level. It's getting dangerous when people, like I said, I think it has a lot to do with this psychedelic tourism that's kind of becoming a trend with people who have. Not everybody who participates in them is doing it for the wrong reasons, but I think a lot of the psychedelic tourists don't have, these higher ideals in mind where conservation is even an issue, where ceremony and tradition is even an issue, and where integration is, a huge issue. These people just think it's going to be a fun weekend. Well, yeah, it can be for sure, but it can be so much more. It can be life altering, not only for you, but for everyone in your life, for everyone around you.
Mm. That's fascinating. The idea of somebody, let's have this fancy retreat weekend in Iquitos at a 5-star hotel and drink ayahuasca and like have it be the idea of a fun weekend. That blows my mind. And I know there's people out there thinking that it'll be really neat. Chelsea Handler did it, so let's do it. And like, what? So we're about to hit 8:00, Shane. I think we're going to have to get you back on to talk about integration because we didn't even get to touch on that. And it sounds like that is a part of your work with people in addiction and post-psychedelic care. So we'd love to have you on to talk about that. Any thing you want to throw out before we wrap up here?
I think it would be great to be back on. I would also like to, if we could next time, talk about my research interests in using microdosing to enhance human physical and mental performance. My own background, like I said, was in sport and performance psychology. And so I'm trying to learn to explore the use of small doses of numerous different substances to bring about more physical things like lower pain tolerance or higher pain tolerance, better balance, better eye-hand coordination, things like that. So a lot of benefits this way. I mean, it's already being used in Silicon Valley for these purposes, for mental stimulation, but I really want to look into physical as well as mental stimulation and how this may also be a bridge to maybe introduce the general larger public to psychedelics. If we can show them that, you don't have to be a hippie to take these things, that, These microdoses, you're not even going to notice anything's going on, but it's going to enhance your work. It's going to enhance your family life. It's going to enhance your athletics and your fitness. It's going to enhance everything in your life. And this may be a bridge into showing the general public that these molecules are not meant to be feared.
Absolutely. Microdosing for golf, tennis, and squash. Maybe for polo too.
Absolutely.
That would be a fascinating bridge. What a way to get in front of some very influential people. Take 20 points off your golf game through microdosing. Now, let's do it. I'd love to. So we'll wrap this recording for now. And thanks, Shane. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.